Standing Committee on the Status of Women. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders, but members are all attending in the room today. And so, as you know, wait till I recognize you by name before speaking. And if you're looking for interpretation, there is a way to select it on your device. And if you are wishing to speak, you can raise your hand. And a reminder to address all comments through the chair. And so the way this will work is we will have each of our witnesses to speak for 5 minutes, and then we will begin rounds of questions, and each side gets a certain number of minutes. And to facilitate that everyone's timely, you'll see my lovely yellow card. When you have 1 minute left, you will see the yellow card, and you will know that you have 1 minute left. And when you have 30 seconds left, you will see the red card, and you will know you have 30 seconds left. And then I will be ever so gentle when I cut you off after 30 seconds. So that's how it will work. And, considering today's topic, then pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by a committee on Monday, September the 15th, 2025, the committee will commence its study of Section 810 of the Criminal Code and Women's Safety. Before we welcome our witnesses, I want to provide this trigger warning. We will be discussing experiences related to violence against women. This may be triggering to viewers with similar experiences. If any participants feel distressed or need help, please advise the clerk. And for all witnesses and for all members of Parliament, it's so important to recognize that these are difficult discussions. So let's try to be compassionate in all of our conversations. I'd like to welcome our witnesses. In person, we have Debbie Henderson, who is here as an individual, and we have Harmy Mendoza, who is the Executive Director of Women Act. Thank you both for being with us. We'll begin with Ms. Henderson. You have the floor for 10 minutes. Thank you.
I'm here today to talk about the preventable death of my niece, Bailey McCourt, a mother of two who was brutally murdered by her former partner, James Plover. Bailey's death is a devastating example of how our justice system continues to fail intimate partner violence, victims of intimate partner violence, even after they do everything right. Bailey was in an abusive relationship with James. Over time, the abuse escalated until one day he strangled her, an act that experts recognize as one of the strongest predictors of future homicide. He threatened to kill her, her daughters, and even assaulted her while she held their 2-year-old child. Bailey did what victims are told to do. She reported the assault, and he was criminally charged. On July 4th, 2025, James Plover was found guilty of all charges. But instead of being taken into custody, he was released awaiting sentencing. There were no safety guards, no GPS monitoring, no alert system, just a piece of paper with conditions of no contact. That same day, 3 hours later, he found her at work, rammed her vehicle, pulled her out. Sorry.
It's okay, take your time. We know this is so difficult.
And he bludgeoned her with a hammer in broad daylight in a parking lot. This happened after his conviction, after the justice system had already confirmed he was dangerous. Bailey should have been protected. Instead, the system relied on the honor system. Expecting a convicted abuser to simply follow the rules. That's not reasonable, and that's not protection. We need to move from promises to protection. A peace bond or no contact order tells an offender what not to do, but it does not tell us when they're not following it until it's too late. GPS monitoring changes that. It turns a piece of paper into real-time protection. With geofencing, instant alerts could go to police, victims, and they would be notified the moment an offender would enter a restricted zone, such as home, school, work. This technology transforms our system from reactive to proactive. Instead of waiting for harm, authorities can respond the instant an offender breaches a restricted area. Victims have a chance to find a safe place and contact the authorities. Evidence shows breaches drop when offenders know that they're being tracked. It creates accountability and it deters crime. Victims of intimate partner violence deserve more than words on paper. They deserve protection by technology, enforcement, and real consequences. A peace bond is a promise. GPS monitoring is protection. It's time we give victims more than paper. It's time we give them a chance to live, to take back a sense of control and safety in their own environments. If an app such as Snapchat can track your friends' whereabouts, we can certainly figure out how to apply that technology to help save lives.
Thank you so much. I just want to say on behalf of the committee, we're so sorry for your loss, and thank you for sharing that. Now we'll go to Ms. Mendoza for 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to all members of the committee. My name is Harmy Mendoza, and I am the Executive Director of Women Act, a Toronto-based charitable organization dedicated to ending gender-based violence and advancing gender equity through systems change. I want to thank the committee for its ongoing leadership in examining how legislative reforms can better protect women and children from violence. Intimate partner violence remains an epidemic in Ontario and across Canada. We continue to see preventable femicides, each representing a life lost due to systemic failures. Since November 2024, the Ontario Association of Interval and Transitional Houses has confirmed 35 femicides, with nearly 60% involving an intimate partner or family member. Just last week, and this was actually 10 minutes from my house, Savannah Kula, a young mother of 4, was murdered by her former partner, while he was out on bail for serious firearm charges related to her. Savannah's death was preventable. It highlights the urgent need for reforms that prioritize risk assessment, survivor safety, and accountability in our justice system. The Domestic Violence Death Review Committee has found that 71% of the 515 domestic homicides in Ontario involved a known history of intimate partner violence. We must act on these warning signs before tragedy strikes. Section 810 of the Criminal Code, which allows for peace bonds, was meant to be a preventative tool. Yet, its effectiveness remains inconsistent and survivors face significant barriers. For example, peace bonds are short-term, typically 12 months, when risk often persists for much, much longer. The burden of application frequently falls on survivors navigating a complex legal system while managing trauma and safety risks. Peace bonds often conflict with family court or child protection orders, leaving dangerous gaps in protection. To strengthen Section 810, reforms should extend duration and improve enforcement, supported by wrap-around services like housing, financial aid, and safety planning, especially at work. Integrate social and economic supports alongside legal protections. Safety depends not only on court orders, but also on survivors' stability and independence. Align peace conditions across criminal, family, and child protection systems for consistency and clarity. This will save lives. Bill C-75 made important strides by recognizing IPV as an aggravating factor and introducing reverse onus provision for repeat offenders. However, implementation remains uneven. Survivors are often not informed of bail outcomes, and conditions are inconsistently enforced. Too often, decisions still prioritize the liberty of the accused over survivors' safety, sometimes with devastating consequences, as we saw with Savannah's case. We need a stricter bail reform, paired with better coordination, that is very important, better coordination across justice, social service, and community sectors. Legislation alone cannot prevent violence without consistent survivor-centered application. Across all legislative areas, we need data that are survivor-centered, disaggregated by gender, race, and immigration status, and focus on outcomes, not just processes. Canada still lacks a legal definition of intimate partner violence in the criminal code. Establishing one, as seen in the UK and Australia, would provide consistency and accountability across systems. Ultimately, safety must be at the heart of our justice reforms. Survivors should not have to navigate fragmented systems or depend on luck for protection. By embedding trauma-informed, survivor-centered, and evidence-based practices, we can move forward to a future where no woman or child lives in fear of violence. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would be pleased to take any questions from the committee.
Thank you so much. Now we're going to move into the questions, and we go from one party to the next, and I'll let them know how long that they have, and well, we have lots of time. So we're going to start with the Conservatives, and it's Madame Bean for 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Bonjour.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, colleagues, and welcome to our two guests. We know that these issues are very hard to talk about. I'll give you a moment to put your earpiece on. At this committee, we have often had to look at delicate matters, especially regarding intimate partner violence. These are always very shocking topics. I would like to give you some context regarding our study. I think that people know that C5 and C75 did not lead to the expected outcomes. The Minister of Justice last week, in tabling C14, in order to slightly improve the situation, recognized that there was an increase of 41% of violence in Canada. And it increased. Homicides increased by 29%, sexual assaults increased by 76%. That is why we wanted to carry out this study. I don't need to remind you that femicides in Canada are increasing significantly. Same thing in Quebec. If I remember correctly, it's about 15 femicides so far in Canada. Ms. Henderson, you shared a troubling testimony, but you also included solutions. You talked about an offenders registry that you would like to see implemented. I find that to be an interesting solution. I believe that the committee would benefit from having additional information on what that registry would include, what data would be collected, how it could better protect women. So that's my first question. My second question now, and hopefully I have time. What could have saved your niece?
Sorry, I don't understand the first question.
Is your translation working okay
Madame,
for
I'm
you?
just wondering, like, there was just...
Oui, Madame Anderson, si mes informations...
Ms. Henderson, if my information is correct, you recommended...
The clock for a minute. I think we need some help with Ms. Henderson's translation. It's not functioning. If you press the thing, you can see at the top that you can choose English or French. We have technical help coming. Wonderful. Is it go? Okay, so I'll give you another minute, Dominic, to repeat your
Merci
question.
beaucoup. Madame Anderson, est-ce que...
Ms. Henderson, would you like for me to answer my question again?
Ça va?
It keeps it keeps trailing out, so I can hear it, and then it trails out, and I can't hear the rest of it.
Can the technician go and see what can be done to get the sound to be the same all of the time? We'll try it again, and if you can't hear Dominique when she's asking the question, just let me know and we'll play it again.
Madame Henderson.
Miss Henderson, can you hear me now? Yes. Great. I won't repeat my entire preamble, but Miss Henderson, you made certain recommendations. Your testimony was very heartfelt, and you shared recommendations regarding GPS monitoring, but you also talked about a registry for offenders for domestic violence. My question is as follows. What should this registry include? What data should be collected? And how do you think that such a registry will increase safety for women? And my second question now is, what could have saved your niece? So, offenders that are being freed and others who are able to serve at home. So my first question on the registry, and secondly on what could have saved your niece.
Ms. Henderson.
In terms of registry, we would be looking at, I think, empowering women to be able to look up if you have a history of domestic violence, and you can actually look at that. Like, we have a sex offender registry that you can look at, and certainly if I had children, I wouldn't want to be around those individuals. If somebody has a history of domestic abuse, you're at least making an informed choice for the most part regarding your relationship with them. So I think that's one thing in terms of, I mean, obviously you'd have to collect data and have a trial run of something like that, see how effective it is. We're obviously seeing that with Bill C-75 as well. We've had the trial run and there's some glitches. And in terms of what I think could have saved my niece, I think that's multifactorial. I think if you take a look at the information provided, she was strangled. That's a clear indicator of looking at high risk for future homicide. I don't believe that he should have been released. It almost looks like he was released on July 4th, and it looks like he's getting summer vacation before his sentencing. If he was held, Bailey would still be alive. If there was GPS monitoring with alerts, Bailey would still be alive. She was surprised at her workplace. He rammed his vehicle into her car when she was arriving back from lunch. So I do think that those are important things to look at.
Thank you. Now we're going to go to Ms. Khalid for 6 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Very much to our witnesses. I really appreciate that you've taken the time to share your very personal and heartfelt testimony here today. And my sincerest condolences, Ms. Henderson, for your loss. I'll start with you. So as you were going through this experience, what was the support system like from the local police?
Ms. Henderson.
I would say that the local police, like, are you talking about after Bailey was murdered?
Yes.
I would say that the local police were as supportive as they could be. They are limited on what information that they can share with us, so it doesn't interfere with their investigation. But they were supportive in terms of connecting with victim services and that type of thing.
And prior to your niece's murder, how involved were the local police with incidents that may have happened beforehand?
I can't actually speak to that. I'm not sure how involved they were with Bailey specifically. I do know that she reached out for help, but I can't speak to that.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about the GPS monitoring system that you had spoken about. What do you envision that system to be like, and who would that be kind of governed or regulated by?
I think with the GPS monitoring, ideally, it would have some form of a system that would go back to local authorities. If somebody is breaching an area that they should not be, then the police are notified and can do something about it. And same with an alert that goes to the victim. With a piece of paper, you're just walking around in your community not knowing where the perpetrator is, and not knowing, actually I would say instead of not knowing, you have nowhere safe because it's a surprise all the time. I would assume it would be monitored somehow, maybe, I don't know if you'd have like a national system set up. There's people that are more involved in technology than I am. I'm just a family member's victim of a family member. So I do know my phone has the ability to track my friends. I can locate my family. And I know my friends can geofence their dogs on their property. So I would assume that people with much more understanding of technology than myself could
Thank you.
assist with that.
Understood. So, I mean, all the different provinces administer justice, right? So at the federal level, we are responsible for creating the laws that are, and then which are administered then by each of the different provinces across Canada. So in terms of, creating a system like a GPS monitoring system, that would be something that provincial governments would be responsible for. And that brings me to my next point, Ms. Mendoza, if it's okay. You spoke about tracking data and monitoring. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? How can tracking that data inform policy?
Thank you for the question. I would assume that any type of changes you want to make them evidence-based. You want to make sure that they have worked, maybe in similar countries like Canada. So for any country, for any province or any municipality who would want to be serious about the changes they're making, I would hope that we could collect information about how the current policies and procedures are or are not working. There are experts on those areas. Canada has a lot of very good, top-of-the-world universities and researchers. My own agency, we are only 7 full-time staff. We are already going into community-based research and trying to collect with our own very fundraised resources information about how current procedures are impacting women. Women Act works with women with lived experience. We have a pool of women who have experienced abuse. And every time there is a change, it could be from the federal government, from the provincial governor, or from the municipality, we immediately consult and we start looking and collecting information about what are the gaps, what is working, what is not working. And I think that that is a key, crucial component of any changes you want to make. Make sure that you work with those experts in the area, those who are providing services, for also those who are monitoring different changes, so that the changes that you are implementing do not have unintended consequences. And you cannot do this alone. You have to do it with the other levels of government.
Ms. Mendoza,
You're out
just
of time,
following.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I have one more.
So
Okay, thank you.
you'll get another round, fear not. We're going to go now to Madame Larouche, 6 minutes.
Madame Laroche, you have 6 minutes. Thank you very much to both witnesses. Ms. Henderson, I would like to offer you my sincere condolences. These testimonies are difficult, but we're doing this work for those who lost their lives to this violence or who were impacted by it. Miss Henderson, you mentioned the signs that were there. I did hear that. There were signs before what happened. This morning, I was speaking to an organization that works on violence against women. There were signs, as you said, before with what happened to your niece. There was a relationship there. And do you believe that if we had recognized that there had been coercive control, if the definition of violence had been better, there could have been an intervention sooner?
Ms. Henderson.
I would agree with that. I would hope that there would have been, but I also think that there's not enough information or education out there for women. They don't necessarily. I think when you get caught up in a situation with someone too who's very charismatic and very charming, it can be confusing as well. And thinking, okay, maybe I did something wrong here. Maybe I did something, and taking some of the blame and not really recognizing it because it's inside your own home. Might come out to the outside, but it's inside your own home. And I think there needs to be more information on coercive control and more education to women about it so they have a greater understanding of what's going on.
Merci, Madame Anderson.
Thank you, Ms. Henderson. Ms. Mendoza, we've had witnesses describe the process for receiving a peace bond as being lengthy and heavy, and they've said that it offers very little support. What discourages women from seeking these peace bonds the most?
So many things. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to answer your question, but I'm going to add a layer of complexity that will shine some light into the importance of collaboration between the different levels of government. So you are standing maybe in a shelter, maybe at a friend's house, and you do have a peace bond that was given to you by our criminal system. And then there is the abuser showing up with the police because he has a access order from their provincial family law or family legal system. So you may even have the police in front of you. The police is going to be confused. I know I am going to be confused if I have a peace bond and a protection order that is contradicting the other order. I guess the reason I want to say this is once you go through that experience, you know that having a paper, having a document that doesn't have any process attached to it doesn't really do much. On top of that, when you have contradicting orders, that makes things either next to impossible. You're confused, you're at risk. Now your child needs to go with the abuser, but you have this other order that doesn't really help you. What I'm trying to say here is, yes, having a process that is fast, that is clear, could help. But so we also have to have other areas that needs to be attached to this order, like I mentioned, wraparound services, VAW experts supporting the victim. Ms. Henderson, you spoke about your situation that happened at workplaces. Risk assessments at workplaces must be done, just like risk assessments at home must be done, because they will be saving lives, because the issue is preventable, because the signs are clear for the victim, for the family, and for the friends. So it's a bit of a complex issue, and like I said before, I guess what I want to draw to your attention is it's important to have a fast, clear process when it comes to the area of your jurisdiction. But if I could just do a bit of ask about exploring how to align this work with other areas, education and training, absolutely important. Coercive control doesn't have to be physical, and it's lethal.
Very good, thank you. Now we're going to go to Frank Caputo for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's really great to be here. I believe this is quite possibly the first time I've subbed in on this committee, and it really is an honor to be here today. I wish I was here under different circumstances. I've spoken about my past work in the House of Commons far too much, but one thing I will highlight is that just before I was elected, I was in charge. I had conduct of a file of a young woman who was killed. It was a charge of second-degree murder that went to manslaughter. I just want to mention her name because her name was forgotten. In fact, funding for the police investigation came because she had been missing for 20 years, and it came because she was through the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Woman. Through those initiatives, there was funding for an undercover operation. Her name was Angel Fair. Her killer is actually out of jail already. And according to the media and parole decisions, has a really bad attitude. So I'm sure that's no solace to the family. An Angel was actually 7 months pregnant, I believe, at the time she was killed. So this is something that is of considerable importance to me, and I don't want to use all my time talking. It was against that backdrop, and also with my prior experience in intimate partner violence, that I had drafted a bill. I drafted it mostly last session, but when Bailey was tragically murdered, I added a few things. So I'm going to ask Ms. Henderson a little bit about that. Thank you very much, Ms. Mendoza, for being here. I don't live too far from Ms. Henderson. In full disclosure, I met with the family about a week ago. So I'm going to ask you about Bill C-225, which is a private member's bill that I've put forward on intimate partner violence, to create the offense of assault intimate partner, to make murder of an intimate first-degree murder, among other things, and also to create a risk assessment at any point in the proceedings. If you want to go ahead, Ms. Henderson, your family has asked me to name this Bailey's Law. Please, the floor is yours on this point.
Yeah, we did ask you to name this Bailey's Law. After Bailey was murdered, we drafted a letter and talked about the things that we would like to see changed. Keep in mind, we're being thrust into this. This is not something that we've spent years looking at. It's new to us, and we're trying to learn all of the pieces and put things together. But one of the important things for our family, and I'm sorry, I'm going to get tearful about it.
Take your time, it's okay.
Is the first-degree murder charges. I don't know if any of you have lost a family member to murder, but it's absolutely gut-wrenching and horrifying. And what makes it worse is to think that this man that murdered her has second-degree murder charges. this behavior went on before. This behavior led to her being murdered. It wasn't something that he just did and it's a crime of passion, momentary lapse of judgment. His behavior before, how he treated Bailey before, how he threatened to kill her and the girls before, it was all there. And we're sitting here stressed when we've already never experienced this kind of stress in our lives, wondering why he hasn't been charged with first-degree murder. Found guilty of first-degree murder, he would spend more time in prison. I'll say that that's justice because that's all that we can get. It's not justice enough for us. We lost a family member, a mother, and we have to live with that. And we hope that with Bill C-225, we fully support it. We were thrilled to see that piece was in there. We're thrilled to see, the GPS monitoring in there, as well as the risk assessment. The ability to step in and potentially stop something and, hey, eyes are on you. That seems very logical, practical, and reasonable to us.
20 seconds.
Oh, okay, thank you. I don't know if there's a GPS provision, but a judge could order that as part of the risk assessment. So if you have 15 more seconds, if you want to add anything else, thank you. And thank you for your time.
All right, we're going to move along then to Madame Menard for 5 minutes.
Madame Anderson, je salue votre...
Ms. Henderson, thank you for your courage. Thank you for being with us today. It's difficult to ask you questions because our hearts are truly with you. You are likely going through the hardest moment of your life, and I think that all committee members here are aware of that. You are going through this difficult time, and we all would have preferred for you not to have to go through this. What do you and your family need during this time?
We need change, and we need change to happen fast. We need to see that the system cares, and the system is willing to do what it can as quick as possible. We've seen some other bills being presented regarding freedom of speech on the internet and or hate speech, sorry. We see that, okay, fair, but we're not seeing lives being lost in such a way because of something that was just said on the internet. I'd like to see stats on that if there's anything different than what I've looked up. Every 5 to 6 days in Canada, somebody loses their life to intimate partner violence. Those stats to me that I didn't know about beforehand are staggering, and it's gut-wrenching, and every time we see another human being murdered on the news, it breaks our heart. And to be quite frank, it makes us lose our faith in our government and the justice system. We want to see swift action. This is so important. This is Canada, not a third world country. Let's get together. It's a nonpartisan issue. It's a human issue. And I would personally like to see people coming together to come up with the best solutions together. And I think that there are some that are on the table. So our family is hoping for support for those bills.
Pensez-vous, Madame Anderson?
Ms. Henderson, with this difficult time that you're facing, and just as other families of victims and survivors, you talked about awareness. Could there be better support for families going through such trying times?
Absolutely, there could be better support. I think until you go through a situation like this, you don't have an appreciation for how complicated it is. There's so many different factors that come into play. ICBC's involved because he drove into Bailey's vehicle. Understanding wills and estates, family law comes into play, criminal law comes into play. I used to be a nurse. I can speak that language well. I don't speak another language very well because that's not my area of expertise. And so when you're thrust upon that, you are quickly trying to learn and figure it out. I know Victim Services is very supportive, but there are a lot of gaps in play. And there needs to be more support around that. There's a lot of financial issues as well where, you know, you save for your retirement, but you don't realize you're going to have to spend your retirement for legal costs because somebody brutally murdered your family member.
Madame Mendoza, vous avez une...
Miss Mendoza, you have expertise in the field, and you have colleagues throughout the country. Violence prevention. Could we have a world where gender-based violence will be reduced? And could there be a world where families like Miss Henderson's wouldn't have to go through such a terrible situation? What more could be done in prevention?
Thank you for your question. That's certainly the hope and the fire that drives my work every day. When I go to work every day, I hope that I will not have a job the next day, because that day is when we will not hear that a woman has been killed in the context of intimate partner violence. Can it be eliminated? I believe it can. I believe it's complex, and I believe it will take efforts that are related to, like I said, all the different levels of government, all the different divisions from the municipalities, all the different ministries from the provincial government, and all the different departments at the federal government.
Thank you very much.
We need to prevent. Sorry. Oh,
No problem. We're moving to Madame LaRouche for 2 minutes et demi.
2.5 minutes, Ms. LaRouche. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to come back to certain things that you mentioned, Ms. Henderson. You talked about GPS monitoring, and I would like to come back to e-bracelets. There are very few surveillance mechanisms that are proactive. Do you believe that these e-bracelets and a mandatory follow-up could change things? Quebec implemented these tools. The federal government is now trying to do the same. So what else could be done? What else could be improved?
I'm familiar with the e-bracelets, so this is the first I'm hearing of it. So I don't specifically know how they work.
Donc, pour vous,
So GPS monitoring would be a concrete solution in order to follow offenders. What could be done to ensure a better follow-up?
Aside from the GPS monitoring, in addition to, I don't know.
Madame Mendoza, est-ce que vous, par rapport au bracelet électronique,
Ms. Mendoza, regarding these ankle monitors, what do you think? If you have anything to add. I saw you nodding, so I was wondering if you had anything to add, if you're aware of these ankle monitors, and if there are any improvements to make to that technology.
I would hope that they would help to keep victims safe. I would also add some other suggestions, like, for example, second responders programs where victim workers team up with the police. That's an idea right there that I know you probably have heard about. We talk about risk and lethality assessments. We talk about co-location of DV workers within police stations, for example. And also provision for perpetrators programs. We got to engage those who are using violence to ensure they make better choices. In Toronto, we have specialized DV courts that are very, very important in terms of making sure that we provide the best support services for victims who have had to go through courts. It is important, I think, but it shouldn't be considered like the only and one and only thing. There should be other attached supports for victims.
Thank you. Very well. Now we're going to go to Ms. Roberts for 5 minutes and then to Ms. Nathan for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to both the witnesses. This is a very important study. And I'm going to first start with Ms. Henderson. And I want to thank you for your courage. You made a few statements, and I'd like to go back to them. You said we need change, and we need change to happen fast. I believe that was your statement. So my first question is, as we know, intimate partner violence has increased up to 76%, a number that hasn't been seen for many, many years. Would you say that bail doesn't work for women?
It appears that way, yeah.
Would you also agree that we need to do a better job of ensuring that we keep women safe by ensuring that these individuals, especially in your niece's case, who was brutally choked and almost died the first time, this individual, this man, should not have been let out of jail. He should not have been given bail. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that.
Okay. She would have been alive today.
I agree with that.
So the other thing that you mentioned was that 1 in 5 women lose their lives every day, and it is an emotional situation. And I have to tell you that one of the witnesses that we had a few years ago who almost lost her life, her perpetrator got off because of the Jordan rule. Do you feel that in situations like this, the Jordan law should not apply because we need to speed up? You said we need to we need to be faster. Do you agree that we need to eliminate that from these particular situations when a woman has been abused more than once?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Mrs. Mendoza, thank you for your work. You mentioned the bracelets, the monitoring system, and you said that is one way that we could help protect women. Would you agree, like all of us parliamentarians carry a panic button, would you agree that having a bracelet and having the survivor walk with the panic button would create more of a safety net for the women?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know, Mrs. Mendoza, if you spoke about children and you spoke about the abuse that they struggle with and that nobody pays attention to them. And I'm not sure if you remember Kara's Law, a child who spoke over and over again, both to the justice system, to the social work system, that she feared for her life and did not want unsupervised visits with her father, from what I recall. Unfortunately, that child died because nobody would listen to her. Would you say that we as parliamentarians need to do a better job of putting a law in place to protect these children?
And I guess the part that is clear to me is that whoever is authorizing visitations is not speaking with the ones who are probably overseeing criminal behavior from perpetrators. So we have this big gap, and we end up with our children or our women in the community being killed in the context of IPV. So there needs to be more coordination. There needs to be some way to ensure that we are looking at safety when authorizing visitations within our family law system in the different provinces in Canada.
I don't think that we have done a good job in the justice system. I mean, if we can go back, I remember a case of 1977 where the visitation was not properly mandated, it wasn't properly supervised, and the father ended up killing his 4 children and his wife before he shot himself and the house went up in flames. And I see this repeating over and over again. Here we go again. What do we need to do to ensure that these perpetrators do not have access to their family and children that are going to cause death? And how do we change the law, like Miss I don't know if it's Miss or Mrs., I'm sorry, Miss Henderson said, how do we speed it up? How do we make people realize how important intimate partner violence is?
Start by talking to each other. Talk to the provincial system. They are in charge of an important area of keeping women and families safe in Canada. I know that some of the witnesses spoke about a GBV commissioner. That would be very important to add accountability to all the different legislation you're changing, to make sure that you have information that is coming from the ground as to how the changes are affecting. Make evidence-based decisions when it comes to different legislation changes. Collect data that is appropriate and that is disaggregated so that you know how it's impacting your communities. This is an issue that is preventable. We can prevent it, and we have virtually no funding to prevent. What do I mean by prevent? We need to also educate. The justice system is one part of the continuum. If we're able to prevent and talk to our young generations about the importance of healthy relationships, we are doing a lot of good work. And we need to evaluate how much that campaign or that prevention strategy is working for our communities and for our country. It's complex, it's big, and I guess my hope is, once again, to bring it to your point, and I get it, this is the jurisdiction, this is what we need to do. You ask me, we haven't done a very good job. I agree, because we need to start looking at this from a different perspective, a perspective that is bigger than us.
I know I don't have a lot of time.
We're at the end of your time. And because it took a little bit more time, I will add time as well to each of the other parties. We're going now to Ms. Nathan for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. Thank you, Ms. Henderson, for being here to advocate for your niece. I'm sincerely sorry for what your family had to experience. Nobody should go through that. Having said that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about her life prior to she calling the police. Do you know if that's the first time she called the police, or has she called the police before?
Like the first time where he was charged with the threat, I actually don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about the family members? Do you know that the abuse is going on in her family? Has she made any reference to that? Her immediate family, like a mom or siblings or anybody?
I know she had conversations with her sister and father and stepmother.
And was there other organizations like Ms. Mendoza's organization that she had to reach out to, or did you go outside of the family for help at all?
I can't speak to that necessarily. I know she was well connected in the community to a program called Mamas for Mamas, but I don't know the ins and outs of that program. Yeah.
I wanted to find out because I'm a domestic abuse worker myself for 20 years, so I know that women take a long time to reach out for help, and for them to call the police, they would have been, the average statistics say they would be abused for 27 times before they would even call the police the first time. So I just wanted to find that out, and also how receptible they are to seeking help in these situations. A lot of women are dependent on their partners for child minding and for finances and things like that, so it takes them a long time, and the families don't really see what happens at all. And I know that you're talking about what could be beneficial. There are a lot of times when the partners abuse and they're charged, when they come out, they go through the families will go through the CAS system, the Child Protective Services system. Even if you call the police one time, they will be involved and they would make recommendations. Was there ever a recommendation such as that?
I can't speak to that. I'm not sure.
They could also do some safety planning and assessments for that. Once after the murder, are they involved with the children? They are involved with the children, and they're in custody and things like that. Is there anything you could recommend for the CAS system? Because that's also one of the there are many systems involved with the justice system as a supporting, like the victim services as well. Are all these systems supporting your family now with?
Yeah, there's multiple systems that have been victim services, the Ministry of Children and Family that have been involved. And again, they're only able to help within their capacity. So, things that we're dealing with now, like Bailey's oldest daughter had a different father who won't let our family have access to her. So automatically, by default, even though he wasn't primary caregiver of her, he got custody of her. And now we don't have any access to her. With the youngest, our family would like to look at adopting her. Well, we're limited in that, and I'm ignorant. I had no idea that once James is found guilty, I assumed he would lose all rights, and that's not the case. And I made the assumption, to me it makes sense. It seems logical how, you also threatened her life before, and she just happened to not be with Bailey at the time, so would you have killed your daughter as well? It's very concerning to think that someone who can take a life is deemed capable of having any sort of legal ties or responsibility to a child like that. And he'd have to grant permission for our family to adopt. So trying to learn all of that stuff, figure that stuff out, and push for changes as needed.
It's a very complex system. Only when you get into it, you try to figure it out. And no matter how much of a process we are trying, each situation is very unique and different. But we are trying to get to the best process that we can get. Thank you for coming here to talk to us today. Thank you, Ms. Mendoza, for being here.
To say something?
Yes, you have 30 seconds.
Okay, yes, absolutely. You asked a question about children's aid societies. Very important, key component of the system's response. Integrate a domestic violence team on each child protection services. The correlation between woman abuse and child abuse is very strong. And if you don't have child protection services workers who are able to identify and establish risk assessments that are appropriate to the situation of the family, you have a big gap as well. And so I know that in Toronto, once again, one of the 4 children's aid societies have implemented one, and they are tracking really good results around that, and they are working very closely with the VAW sector. Sorry.
Madame LaRouche, je vais vous donner une addition.
I will be giving you an additional minute, so you have 3.5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is for both witnesses, because we did talk about the Jordan case earlier. We sought to go through these files quickly thanks to that. And so it seeks to remove certain burdens by using peace bonds, for example, but they don't ensure a real follow-up. So if either of you had any comments to make on that. Ms. Mendoza, I see you nodding. Perhaps you could start if you would have anything to add on follow-ups.
My gut response is, yeah, they don't ensure safety, and you have these cases going through fast, but what happened then with the ones that didn't get through, right? We might be looking at unintended consequences in terms of that particular case. So it is important to ensure that there are risk assessments included on each one of these cases, and it is important that there are services attached to each one of these families. That's all I can say about that.
Cette question de l'évaluation.
This risk assessment matter that I was talking to an organization about is important. Each case is unique. There are people who are at risk of repeat offending. There are cases where perhaps somebody lost their mind. And so that risk assessment is so important. And how could it be done better? How can it truly respond to the needs and ensure a proper follow-up and lead to the right sentences? What is missing?
Are two things. Risk assessments, there are a lot of tools out there. A lot of them are evidence-based and proven that they work, and a lot of them are used by the justice system, including the police. The violence against women sector have developed their own risk assessments and in the early stages of evaluating them. So there is one key important step as to the risk assessment, but the follow-up is that safety planning that need to exist and need to be done by violence against women experts so that you can have one for work, one for home. Guess where is going to, imagine this, this victim has the courage to leave the abuser today. She's probably going to go to a friend's home, maybe a shelter if there's one bed somewhere. The following day, the place where she's going to go that the abuser knows is work. The abuser knows that the victim is going to be there the following day at 9 a.m. A little bit of what happened with Bailey. So workplaces have a responsibility to ensure safety. And there is something to say about ensuring that employers also play a role on preventing lethality. And so when I speak about risk assessment, in my mind, I am also speaking about safety planning and how we as communities have a role to play within the context of the different jurisdictions in terms of the different employment legislation in different provinces.
We're out of time for Madame LaRouche and actually got the wrong order. So next we're going to Ms. Cody and then we'll come to Ms. Fancy for 5 minutes each.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both for coming to the committee today. Ms. Henderson, I'm truly sorry for your loss. My deepest condolences to you and your family at this very most difficult time. I can't imagine what it is like to be here to talk to everyone about what you have gone through in your family. So it's great courage you have, and I thank you for being here. Through the past changes with laws, we've seen that mandatory minimum sentences was removed for several serious offenses. So I was wondering, from your family's perspective, do you believe that lighter sentencing or reduced accountability played a role in any way that allows women to continue to be at a greater risk?
I do think lighter sentencing does. You need consequences to your actions. If consequences aren't strong enough, where's the deterrent?
And if I could hear from both of you different perspectives here on, I've heard from several people that these justice reforms have weakened deterrence and emboldened repeat abusers. So what message do you think this sends to those seeking protection, and what should we do to strengthen the protection to change the outcomes?
I can speak a little bit about what I know in terms of recidivism and abusers using violent behaviors again and again. In Ontario, there is this very important researcher. Her name is Katrina Scott. Her work is about perpetrators and those who use intimate partner violence. And she has developed this high-risk model for offenders so that they no longer choose to use violence or to reduce the use of violence. It has shown a lot of important data. And the reason I'm mentioning is because that particular model has been replicated in different parts of the world, I believe. In Canada, this model has not been implemented or funded at all. So I guess this is all to say as to the importance of the justice system. Absolutely, a strong justice system that has important key consequences for those who use and choose to use violence. But the truth is that there is only so many years you're going to lock them up. We need solutions that are long-term. Once this abuser stops engaging with one family, I think actually her study, and I apologize, the last time I read her research was a long time ago, but I remember some of the findings and how these offenders would touch up to 9 families in their lifetimes. So justice systems has an important role to play, and so does intervention for perpetrators and those who use violence, because they're going to come out of jail. They're going to be out in the community. Having some knowledge is important, and also important that our young generations do identify red flags, that we talk about healthy relationships, and we start very, very, very early. We don't wait until they are, it's too late for us to intervene. We need to prevent it instead of dealing with the consequences of it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that. So do you believe the current list of conditions that can be applied as part of bail orders adequate? And in your opinion, should judges have the option to impose more conditions? And if so, what are some conditions that you might like to see?
Well, I know some of the witnesses that came here before us spoke about making judges justify the rationale behind not ordering a condition that makes sense, that is important to keep victims safe. So I am unable to speak of the specific conditions in terms of the different individual complex cases, but I guess that it would be a good idea to ensure there is training for the justice system, including judges in terms of IPV, and also to ask them to justify a rationale behind the lack of conditions that are requested by the victim.
And that's your time. And now we're going to go to Ms. Fancy for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and through you, I'd like to first also, as we all have today, say thank you for your courageousness in coming, Ms. Henderson. Unfortunately, myself being from Nova Scotia, where in the last year, since Ms. Mendoza's nodding her head, she knows what I'm going to discuss in terms of, in the past year, we've had 8 different violence-related offenses towards either intimate partner violence or gender-based violence. And in my riding specifically, we've had 4. So it's unfortunate that we're here in discussing this, but this is the important work. So I really commend you in helping us do that important work. I have 3 things to mention, and then I have 2 questions, one for you both. So, in Nova Scotia, we have declared intimate partner violence an epidemic since 2021. And in since doing that, with the, being a provincial epidemic, I want to highlight a part with rural vulnerability a lot of this that we've talked about today has been from an urban lens, but I want to talk about, and ask Ms. Mendoza in regards to geographic isolation that women from rural areas tend to have, as well as fewer policing resources. My riding is predominantly rural and in South Shore St. Margaret's, which is why I'm trying to ask these questions for my people in the riding. They're also limited to accessible transportation, which also compounds that risk for women that are trying to leave violent situations. So in the beginning remarks, Ms. Mendoza, you talk about, the prevention piece. And then we've talked about the during, and then the bill that we've discussed today, the after. So I'd like to, with a rural lens, please, how Women Act has long been emphasized on the prevention and the education. You talked about the education piece earlier today. What preventative measures do you believe are the most effective? Because we said there are some preventable measures. If you could give us some exemplars for that, would be wonderful, that are effective in reducing intimate partner or gender-based violence. And how do we see our provinces working with us? So we talked about the provinces need to step up or the provinces need to do whatnot. So I'm looking for exemplars in that regard, please.
I really like your question, and I truly wish I have specific numbers because I love data, I love numbers, and I would love to tell you, 90% of the individuals who have undertaken any of our prevention strategies have changed their behavior, something like that. We are way too early at Women Act to give you that type of example or that specific answer. But I could speak about the fact that at Women Act, we started to talk about the importance of talking to those who are not, I'm going to call them usual partners or usual suspects, Like we talk a lot with, say, the police, the health system, and I can go on for hours talking about that, just to give you examples of the different pieces. But I guess what I want to say is we started to knock at the doors of, for example, the STEM sector. And kind of talk a little bit about the context of workplace harassment or intimate partner violence and how employers could play a role on supporting victims and preventing. It has taken us to so many different places where we're learning a lot about how our HR policies as employers do have an important component as to the support and prevention. And you have to do that tactfully, mindfully, and also with a really good legal eyes as to your responsibilities as an employer. So we have now been working with different sectors, including I wish I remember the whole name, but they do work with the military. So they are a Canadian department, and talk about healthy relationships with young cadets, for example. It's important. It's starting. It's just the beginning of a very small, tiny little piece of work. We are integrating evaluative components into it because we want to know to what extent it made a difference. The other important areas of education and prevention are raising awareness. Campaigns that could get us talking about the importance of language, for example. Women Act launched this petition, and that was 2 weeks ago. And we did launch, and we asked our communities to help us, ask Amazon to take down a descriptor of men tank tops. They call it wife beaters. In this age and time, I cannot believe I'm spending time asking Amazon to do that. 9 out of the 10 third-party vendors took it down. And so language is important. It makes an important impact in the way how we culturally see violence against women. So I'm happy to tell you that if you look for wife beater tops, you're going to find only one vendor. But it's a small little thing, but it is important. If we don't express how dangerous that type of language is with our young people, with our neighbors, with our family members. So I guess this is all to say that it's complex. It varies. And
that's
I'm
your
sorry.
time.
I'm always
no, you know
time.
what? Your information is fabulous, and we appreciate it. And I'm just supposed to kindly lead us along, and Madame Veen will do 5 minutes. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There was a recent event that happened in Quebec, a woman was killed on September 7th, and it was a case of domestic violence. The person was arrested, her former partner, 20 years of domestic violence. He also violated conditions, bail conditions, at least 16 times. To give you an idea, these are the kinds of cases that we're seeing throughout Canada, unfortunately. And the Conservatives on this side of the room want to remind everyone of the fact that victims should be our focus. And I would like to thank my colleagues Brock and Caputo, former prosecutors, who are helping us work towards better legislation. C-14 was tabled last week by the Justice Minister, and he admitted that there was about a 40% increase in crime in Canada. There are two things that we find tiring or exhausting with C-14. The first is a principle that allows people to be released as soon as possible. This means that people who are dangerous, repeat offenders, were released. And the other thing that we take issue with is the fact that we're not bringing back mandatory minimums, as was the case with C5. Ms. Henderson, what is more important for you? The principle of holding back and releasing people sooner, or protecting the public?
It's an easy one, protecting the public, no brainer.
Madame Mendoza.
Absolutely.
See advantages and disadvantages in a way. I don't want to get partisan. I want to tell you that for me, it's about making decisions that are proven to work, and that we should be looking at this so that we can save people's lives. You're asking for a specific bill. I would say, what's the evidence? Have you collected any evidence of the changes? What do you have out there so that you can make the best possible decision?
Madame Mendoza,
Ms. Mendoza, I would like to have your opinion on Ms. Henderson's recommendation. And Ms. Henderson, you're not the only one who recommended having a registry for offenders. The Renault family also made such a request, and they organized a march 2 weeks ago. And so they have also been asking for a registry. This would help women know who they were dealing with after meeting a man, because it can be very difficult to get information. Ms. Mendoza, would you agree with creating a registry, and what should be included in such a registry?
It could be part of the overall set of tools and options and supports that a victim and a family could access, and that could definitely help and enhance safety for victims.
Parfait, merci. Madame la Présidente, je sais pas si...
Thank you. Madam Chair, 30 seconds left. All right, so that's enough time for me to thank you. I don't know if I'll be able to come back to my questions, but I'm sure my colleagues will, and thank you very much for coming to this committee today.
Ms. Khalid for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and again, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. I want to talk to you a little bit, Ms. Mendoza, about Bill C-14. I'm not sure if you've had the time to review it. It brings in bail reform, and it puts a reverse onus when it comes to bail. Tell us a little bit about, with your expertise, how you feel that a reverse onus would help protect women as they're trying to flee gender-based violence.
It would probably be helpful because they are not going to be put on the hot seat to be able to come up with, certain level of evidence or whatnot. I think it might be helpful, but I also want to reinstate the importance of the other areas that are key in order to keep this family safe. And how are we ensuring the changes that we are implementing are indeed not having unintended consequences. Let's talk about that, yes, but let's also talk about contradicting court restriction orders. That to me is also as important. I don't want to undermine the importance of one bill or the other. I'm trying to say let's not lose sight of the complexity of what women are living and experiencing out there. Families, victims of violence, are having to walk through a series of complexities and intersecting systems that are not communicating with each other, and that is making things very, very hard. So let's look at that, but let's also look at the unintended consequences of our decisions.
Thank you for that. So what I'm hearing you say, Ms. Mendoza, is that it's not just writing the law, it's also about the implementation, about the enforcement, and the education, all of that combined together to make sure that women are safe. Am I correct?
Yes, thank you for paraphrasing what I'm saying, because I feel like I'm a bit of a broken record, but yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And I want to be mindful and respectful of your different jurisdictions, your different priorities, or it's just that for those of us who are living out there facing our clients, for us it's a no-brainer. I get it. For you it's different. You have to navigate your own structures and jurisdictions and so forth. But for us, it's like, when are we going to actually see them collaborating with each other to address this huge gap that is actually killing women and children?
Thank you very much. I can hear the passion in your voice. I feel it all the way from here. I appreciate that. Ms. Henderson, how do you feel about what Ms. Mendoza is proposing with respect to really addressing the issues that we're talking about today?
I just have concerns, like, in terms of reverse onus. Like, what are the hurdles that someone has to go over to prove that they're safe to go out into the community? Like, that part seems very vague to me and very concerning. I think people should understand that and know the ins and outs of it. I also have some concerns if you let somebody out in least onerous, least restrictive, or at the earliest opportunity. How would those interplay together? It's hard for me to sort of.
Let me just clarify. So a reverse onus is when the defendant would have to prove that they should be let out, that the standard quo would be to keep them in jail, and they would have to prove that they should be let out while they are awaiting trial. That's a reverse onus.
How would they do that? What's the criteria
with a bail hearing? So they would have to prove at a bail hearing that they should be allowed to get out into society, as opposed to what the current law says, and actually what the Supreme Court also has mandated, that the current status is that people should be let out unless they are, based on the judge's ruling, too dangerous to be let out, so that they should be remanded until their trial. So what this bill is proposing is that the status quo would be that they be kept in jail, and they have to prove that they should be allowed out. So it's kind of a reverse. So that's what Bill C-14 is proposing. But then also, Ms. Mendoza has put in some really, I think, important recommendations here today about all levels of government kind of coming together, civic society coming together to make a fulsome and wholesome approach to combating gender-based violence. So I just wanted to know what your thoughts are about this approach so far.
And that's the end of your time. I'm sorry. That's okay. She's going to get a chance to say some more. I think we have time. I'm looking at the clock. I think we have time for one more round. So we're going to go to Ms. Roberts for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and again, thank you for your courage to both of you. So I just want to, you like numbers, you like stats, and this is, I'm going to bring up some numbers for us to digest today.
Excuse me for one moment. Yeah, Madame LaRouche, what had happened in the last go-round was that I missed the order, and I put you ahead of the people that were supposed to go, Connie and Jessica. So that's why it looks like you're not getting around, but you will get around after Madame Menard. You will get your time.
Time back?
Yes.
Thank you. So here's some stats. January 14th, 2023, 13 letters were sent to the previous Prime Minister at the time, Prime Minister Trudeau, from the premiers to toughen the law on bail reform. So let's look at what just recently happened. In Brampton, a partner was out on bail and he killed his partner. And he also had other charges previously in 2023 made by the partner, and nobody took that extra step to realize that this man was violent and also owned firearms. We talk about firearms, right? So we didn't do our job to protect this woman, because the first thing they should have done is, if we talk about reverse onus, this guy should have never been let out on jail. He should have stayed in jail until the trial. In 2022, 184 women and girls were violently killed, primarily by men. In Canada in 2022, there were 117,093 victims of intimate partner violence aged 12 years and older. 78% of the victims and survivors of police report intimate partner violence in 2022 were women and girls. So it takes me back to think of this. We've been talking about this bail reform since I've been in Parliament, and I like what you said earlier, Mrs. Mendoza, we got to do something real quick. Like they're working like a bunch of snails. We got to get this through, because if we don't get this through, women are going to continue to be killed. So how do we justify the laws if we don't implement them a lot quicker to protect the women and children of our country? I'll ask you both the same question. What do you think we need? What message do we have to send to make sure that we change it now?
Implement the changes using evidence that they work. If you don't have it, make sure that you collect data so that you know that they are working.
I just collected the data.
And no, but data about what you're going to implement. Yeah, you've collected data of what it was implemented before.
Right.
But how about you make a change today? You need to know if it's working and how much is working and for who is working. Because if we look at Indigenous women, women with immigration status, precarious immigration status, they deal with a different layer of situations and complexities. And once you know how that's working, keep in contact and in touch with community and service providers so that they can alert you of the different changes and how they are implementing our communities.
I have limited time, and I agree with what you're saying, and I appreciate that. But let me also tell you that there's also a cultural situation in this country. We heard from a witness whose father, who had her husband charged with intimate partner violence, and her father's comments to her was, "You bring shame to this family. I would rather be carrying you out and burying you than having shame putting your husband in jail." So you talk about education. Yes, I agree. We need to change that. These are the Canadian rules. These are the Canadian laws. You either live by them or you don't step foot in this country. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I had to bring that out because I remember the look on this victim's face, survivor, pardon me, when she came here to testify. It was very, very emotional for me and for her. Debbie, or Miss Anderson, I'm sorry if I called you Debbie. Do you agree that we have to stop talking and start action so that this bail reform can protect more women before it escalates out of control?
Absolutely, and I don't. As a family member of a victim, my priority is not having an individual get out on bail. That is not my priority. How is that our priority? Getting you as a criminal out on bail. You've committed a crime, likely repeatedly, likely all of it's not documented, and now we don't have a family member. 2 children don't have a mother. I could care less about you getting bail, to be honest. And sorry if that's emotional, but I feel like you would all feel that way if you lost a family member too.
Well, I mean, I guess I get passionate about it, so I apologize for my passion, but one of my colleagues was killed by someone that was out on bail and was here illegally, and we did absolutely nothing to save her. And it shouldn't happen, and it's continuing to happen, and it scares the living Jesus out of me that we are sitting idle and listening to all these witnesses and doing nothing about it.
Yes,
So
it certainly is urgent. That is the end of your time, I'm sorry. And now to Madame Menard for 5 minutes.
Madame Anderson, vous avez mentionné.
Ms. Henderson, you mentioned that this needed to be a cross-partisan issue, and I think that what brings us together in this room is that we need to act urgently to protect victims and to support their families. With what is proposed, there's always the possibility that it won't meet the threshold for the courts and that it won't support victims. It needs to go through the courts. Ms. Mendoza, a bill done without consultations or after consulting a single group, is that a matter of concern?
Sorry, you got cut off at the end. My apologies. The very last part I couldn't hear.
Absolument pas besoin de vous excuser.
No need to apologize. A bill that is redacted after consulting only a single group of experts, is that enough?
No, I think we need to have a broad consultation always. And I would like to add that cultural specific issues or ethno-specific issues must be considered. And I would like to add that violence against women happened in every culture, in every country in this world. It happens in English Canada, it happens in French Canada, it happens in everywhere and in every class. And that is very important for me to say, because I want to make sure that it is clear that we're looking at an issue that does not discriminate.
Pas parler de ce cas de figure en particulier.
We haven't spoken about this specific case yet, but in a matter of self-defense, a woman is assaulted by her partner. She defends herself, and this leads to the death of her partner. So this is a case of self-defense. A bill would criminalize this woman, and do you see an issue with such a bill?
That's a very, very important and heavy question, and I really don't feel comfortable speaking about specific cases because they are so complex and you will need to have more information. I guess what I can tell you about those cases and my experience is that it's always important to consider the primary aggressor behavior, which means what's the pattern? Who has been abusing who by way of a pattern? And that is important to consider in the situations, especially if that person was defending herself, because otherwise she would have been killed. So I think that is a key consideration in cases like this, in my opinion.
Madame Anderson, est-ce que vous avez...
Ms. Henderson, do you have anything to add to such a scenario in a case of self-defense?
In a case of self-defense, do we not have laws that protect somebody when they are acting in self-defense? I would be very concerned if the justice system can't differentiate between a partner being brutally murdered by a perpetrator versus a victim protecting themselves. I feel like if the system can't figure that out, it undermines our justice system. And the Crown has the burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it was not self-defense. So I think that's my thought on that.
Il me reste du temps, 30 secondes, c'est très court.
Only 30 seconds left. Ms. Mendoza, could you come back to what you were saying regarding the work that needs to be done between community organizations, the criminal code, the provinces, the federal government? You were speaking what you were saying was so interesting earlier.
Yes, absolutely. I don't want to, in any case, sound like I don't appreciate the complexity of the different systems that you have to navigate from your own areas of work or, I guess, priorities as parties or, the issue is not partisan. The issue is, it shouldn't be partisan. It should be about keeping our communities safer and to eliminate once and for all gender-based violence.
Wonderful. And now, Madame LaRouche, 2 minutes et demie.
Thank you very much to both of our witnesses for your comments today. They will be very helpful for our study, and we're hoping to find concrete solutions. In Quebec, there was a report called Rebuilding Trust that included concrete measures, for example, ankle monitoring that the federal government is looking into, specialized courts as well. There were also recommendations regarding the criminal code, so we were seeking to make criminal coercive control. I'll start with you, Ms. Mendoza. In your opening remarks, you talked about intimate partner violence, and we also want to recognize femicide in the criminal code. Is that what you meant? And if so, could that change things?
Absolutely. If we can recognize femicide, it could be very helpful, not only in terms of the law, but also for all of us who are watching closely what's the priority of this government. So I would absolutely agree with you. I also talk about, sorry, I'm just quickly looking at my notes, the fact that Canada does not have a legal definition of IPV in the criminal code as well. And so they both would be absolutely helpful.
Madame Anderson, pour terminer.
Ms. Henderson, I'll let you answer either one of two questions. What could Parliament do to improve services for victims? And there are many things that need to be better coordinated, or perhaps would you have one measure that we should take at the federal government? So you can answer one or the other, improving coordination and collaboration.
I think honestly it would be so great if there was just a point person for each family going through this kind of thing to help navigate the system and all the ins and outs of it. And instead of you have to go to this person for this person for that, and you have to tee it up yourself, all while bawling your face off, and trying to navigate, in our situation, funeral stuff, and there's just so many different balls in your court, and you're expected to juggle 20 different things, and I can't even juggle 3. So I think if there was a way to implement something like that for victims, that would be, I think helpful.
Excellent. Last two questioners will go to Ms. Cody for 5 minutes, and then we have Ms. Nathan for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to ask you, Ms. Henderson, in regards to the reverse onus of proof, it's a procedure that requires the defendant to demonstrate that he can actually be released within the current laws. So he will have to present a release plan. So the judge must rule after assessing this plan. Don't you think that this is basically just a procedure that will change nothing and that dangerous people can still be released?
Worry that dangerous people can still be released. I'm not fully confident in it. I mean, you know, can you do 10 jumping jacks or 5? Like, what's the criteria that you have to cross to be able to be released on that? I just am not feeling confident in it, and I don't feel confident in it in the fact that there's potentially a life at risk. That's the most important thing that we have on Earth in our daily lives, is a human life. So I don't feel very confident in what I know of what's been put forward. I just don't know what the criteria is, and if I knew maybe what the criteria is, I might support something like that, but I don't at this point know how many jumping jacks it'll take, for lack of a better example.
In regards to everything that has happened and the unfortunate experience that you had to go through, if the government invested massively in mental health services and housing, which is something that a lot of people are demanding, would that have been enough to protect Bailey at the moment her aggressor was prematurely released after their conviction?
Not in this situation, no. I don't see how that would have saved Bailey's life.
Okay, and Ms. Mendoza, it's been said that peace bonds are nothing more than a piece of paper, and I think that resonates with a lot of people. And they're said that it's short-term and not properly enforced, and not a lot of follow-up with them. For peace bonds to be more than paper and to actually carry weight, do you think extending their duration for serious or repeat cases of intimate partner violence, perhaps up to 2 years, would create a real window of safety for victims? And beyond just the length of time, would adding stronger federal standards such as mandatory Crown review before a bond expires or automatic notification if conditions are breached make a difference in giving families the confidence in a system that they're actually being protected?
I would agree to that, and yet again, to add a few other areas. Like I spoke about perpetrators programming. I spoke about one researcher who has developed a model that works for perpetrators, that has shown that perpetrators change their behavior after they go through her model, for example. It's been proven. So instead of, for example, a mandatory program, in the case of Ontario, the Partner Assault Response Program, it's 12 weeks now. It used to be 15. It was shrinked because of funding restraints. We don't know to what extent the PARS, it's called PARS, the PARS program works. We don't know if it works for a specific set of abusers more than others. And so we can have some of those assumptions. Common sense will tell us probably that more time will be helpful, because all this process, the legal justice system takes a lot of time. But without proper data collection and evaluation of the changes, I'm afraid I can't even begin to point out what are the areas that needs to be watched more closely, or change, or improved, or go back to the drawing table and rework it again. We just don't have that right now.
Excellent. And now for the last round of questions to Ms. Nathan. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. Ms. Mendoza, last time I didn't get a chance to talk to you, so I just thought I'll start with you. As an agency, can you tell me a little bit about the type of women that you see? And can you comment on what percentage of them talk about reuniting with the perpetrator, and the difficulties they talk about when they're separated?
The agency I work for do not provide direct client services. We work with women survivors, and we do have a whole curriculum to make sure they become peer researchers through our community-based research curriculum. However, I do have experience working in the frontline work. Like you mentioned, I used to be a violence against women shelter worker, and I coordinated a few housing programs. What I can tell you is that some women do want to go back with the abuser, and they have the right to do that. You know, when I talk about the complexity of things, why are we not engaging perpetrators so that they change their behavior and the way how they use violence? Chances are, like I said, and it's proven, that this perpetrator will touch. If this woman doesn't want to go back to him, he will likely touch another, I think, 9 families. That's what I last remember. I may be wrong. But I guess what I'm trying to say is some women do go back, and they have the right to go back. And why? Many reasons. They want their children to grow up with their father. They love this person. It happens. And so for us is, what are the different options this person has so that she remains safe within that choice she made? You actually asked the question about child protection services. They get involved, they get engaged the minute the justice system is engaged. How are child protection services prepared to support this type of family? There are violence against women, they call it, I think, domestic violence teams that have proven to work. And so it's a bit of a co-location system where you have the VAW expertise and the child protection expertise working together to support this family, to avoid or to prevent any lethality for them. Because, yeah, some victims go back.
So I know the judges have the right to mandate people to take part in the POWER programs. As such, because it's mandated program, a lot of the times you don't get to see the results that you want to see. At the same time, the CAS, Children's Aid, cannot mandate someone to attend an anger management program or a POWER program. Do you think if Children's Aid Society could do that, it would help the situation? They could only make recommendations. They cannot make them do a program.
See, well, for example, I can talk about the Children's Aid Society of Toronto. They do recommend, if that's the case, abusers to take the Caring Dads program. And I know that they have integrated some level of evaluation and that it has been helpful. So I think that, yeah, every one of our different sectors and divisions and, I don't know, crown operations have a lot to contribute to this big, complex support service provision.
Sorry about that. Can you think of any negative effect or any mitigating factors that may affect an IPV registry, an electronic bracelet, or even making the intimate partner violence a first-degree murder? Can you think of any of them?
Not right off the top of my head right now.
Thank you. And in talking about rehabilitation for men based on anger or whatever the causes are for intimate partner violence, we have to understand that when we make a law, it would apply to everyone equally. It won't apply to women separately and men separately. And we talk a lot about abusive men, but there are situations that women do get caught in this, and they go through the system. Sometimes they don't have the supports for this, and also the translation for it. Having said that, what type of rehabilitation, like we've talked about the PAR, we talked about the CAS stuff, and there are healthy relationship programs in schools. They teach them, and also there's a workplace safety mandate in some provinces, Ontario included, that the workplace has to keep the employees safe from violence and intimate partner violence. So they have a protocol that you must go through training every month for the women.
Unfortunately, we're at the end of our time. So what I would do is invite the witnesses, if you have a response to Ms. Nathan's question, you can send the answers to the clerk. This will conclude our panel for today. I want to give a heartfelt thanks for both of the witnesses appearing. Very brave, very courageous. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And for the members, before we adjourn, there's a couple of housekeeping items that I just want to bring to your attention. The first one is the Minister of Women and Gender Equality is coming on Monday. And so we have a supplementary or a budget for that of $500 to approve, and as well as a supplementary budget for our gender-based violence for another $500. Does the committee agree to adopt these budgets? Yeah. Very good. You're very cooperative. Now, about briefs, there's a lot of people interested in this study. And so I would suggest that we should open this up for briefs, but to spare our analysts, the translation constraints of timing are a lot. So what I'm going to suggest is that we allow briefs not to exceed 2 pages, which is about 1,000 words, and that we give people until November 28th. That's after we've heard all of our witnesses and another couple of days, so that all of that testimony in those briefs can be incorporated in the final report. Do I have the committee's approval? Ms. Khalid.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just wondering, with respect to the deadline on the written briefs, once, let's say somebody submits it on the last day, which is November 28th, it would take some time for translation. Would that delay our report writing process?
No, because for the clerk or the analyst to take the testimony, which goes up to November 26th, they're going to have to do their version 1 report. It's going to take till mid-December, I would think, at the earliest. So it's not going to delay it. It'll be incorporated.
Okay with that.
Excellent. All in favor? Wonderful. Thank you so much for your good work today, ladies, and for our witnesses. Hang on, one more thing. News release. Got to turn the page. Does the committee agree that in relation to this study, the clerk and the analysts of the committee, in consultation with the chair, will prepare a news release for publication on the committee's website to invite the public to submit briefs? Yes. Very good. With that, then, I adjourn the meeting.